It's Thursday, it's the 17th of July. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. Now, we start at the Inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom. Despite a spate of provocations out of North Korea, the communist state still wants to send athletes and a cheering squad south of the border in September to take part in the Asian Games, which will be hosted in the city of Incheon. Well, both sides are holding talks on this Thursday as we speak to work out the details. ARIRANG News Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
Departing for the border village of Panmunjom for Thursday's working-level talks, South Korea's chief delegate said general issues surrounding the North's participation in the upcoming Asian Games will be up for discussion.
The working-level meeting is aimed at discussing practical issues regarding the participation of North Korean athletes and cheering squad members in the Incheon Asian Games. We enter the talks with sincerity with a goal of successfully hosting the Games.
Key agenda items in today's talks are the transportation and accommodations of the North Korean delegation at the Games and how their expenses will be covered. Also in question is just how many cheerleaders North Korea plans to bring across the border. If they plan to send a large number, as they've previously hinted, the squad might travel by ferry and use it as a place to stay, as they did during the 2002 Asian Games, which were hosted in the South Korean city of Busan. North Korea may also propose forming a joint cheering team and creating united teams for certain events. So far, South Korea has not been keen on the idea. The two sides are not expected to reach an agreement in their first meeting on Thursday. It's expected they'll need to hold additional rounds of talks before the Incheon Asian Games begin on September 19th. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Well, if Japan ends up further relaxing unilateral sanctions on North Korea, Seoul would like to be consulted beforehand. A high-ranking South Korean official told reporters in Tokyo that Japan needs to see the big picture and take into account that independent actions could affect the international community's ability to curb North Korea's nuclear program. The official said Japan should also keep the U.S. in the loop about discussions it's having with Pyongyang. Japan recently eased some of its restrictions on humanitarian exchanges with North Korea after Pyongyang reopened an investigation into Japanese nationals abducted by the North in the 1970s and 80s. Meanwhile, China has released its 14th set of confessions from Japanese war criminals. Now, this is their latest attempt to raise global awareness of Japan's wartime atrocities amid its disputes with Tokyo over history and territory. The Chinese government is publishing the confessions every day for 45 days. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details on the latest release.
In the latest war criminal confession to be released by China, Geishi Shimioka, an officer of Japanese Imperial Army, admits that troops under his control used to engage in human target practice. He says that, at the time, it was his unit's policy was to build up soldiers' courage by letting them shoot at Chinese prisoners of war. In July 1942, in Taiwan City, 220 POWs were used as live targets, and each Japanese cadet was ordered to kill POW.
In another instance, 340 new recruits killed 340 prisoners of war.
On top of this, Japanese troops used germ warfare on villages spreading typhoid and cholera to the residents. They also raped hundreds of women and executed them after, in an attempt to hide evidence.
After a young woman was raped, lower-ranked troops were often ordered to rape the woman's mother.
Geishi also confessed to personally killing numerous civilians and POWs using a traditional sword carried by Japanese officers. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye and her science and technology advisors gathered on this Thursday to talk about specific plans to create new growth engines that create more jobs. The proposed measures are expected to help the government tackle global issues such as climate change as well as aging society. Here's our Choi Yoo-sun with this report.
President Park's science and technology advisors pledged to make Korea one of the world's top 7 biotechnology nations by 2020 by fostering 50 globally competitive biofirms and launching 10 new types of medicine. To achieve this, the Advisory Council first proposed turning Korea into the world's largest biosimilar medicine producer by 2016, especially as more than a dozen innovative drugs overseas are close to their patent expiration. The council also talked about investing more in commercializing stem cell and gene therapy treatments and utilizing Korea's advanced IT capabilities to develop state-of-the-art medical equipment. Because of the aging global population and growing health concerns, the advisors expect there to be rising demand for bio-related industries over the next 20 years. As more and more countries look towards eco-friendly energy sources in tackling climate change, the Science Ministry vowed to expand R&D investments into related technologies such as solar and fuel cells and bioenergy to $2 billion by 2020. And the Land Ministry suggested easing regulations and offering tax support to boost construction of self-sufficient zero-energy buildings that minimize energy usage through insulation. At Thursday's meeting, President Park said both the bio and renewable energy areas contribute to improving quality of life and opening an era of national happiness. She then urged the government and the private sector to work together to create a self-sustainable industrial ecosystem. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, in domestic politics here in Korea, the race is on. Campaigning for the July 30th by-elections officially began this Thursday, and the stakes are high. In fact, at the highest we've ever seen for a by-election, with 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs. Here's our Kim Jung Joo.
For the next 13 days, 55 candidates will be on the campaign trail, battling it out for the 15 vacant parliamentary seats that are up for grabs in the July 30th by-elections. 6 of the 15 seats are located in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, 2 in the Gyeongsang-do provinces, and 4 in the Jeollado provinces. The ruling Saenuri Party is fielding candidates in all 15 races, and its new chairman Kim Jung Joo underscored how important the election is.
The Saenuri Party must secure a majority of parliamentary seats through the July 30th by-elections. For the next 2 weeks, I will concentrate solely on the election and postpone all decisions until the results are in.
With no clear winner in last month's local elections, the unified main opposition party is determined to make a strong showing on July 30th.
These by-elections are a match that pits our party, which strives for a brighter future for all Koreans, against the ruling party, which is filled with arrogance and is blinded by self-righteousness.
During the campaign period, the Saenuri Party is expected to emphasize its connection to President Park Geun-hye and its commitment to helping the administration achieve its goal of national reform. The main opposition party will focus on the government's mishandling of April's ferry tragedy and present alternatives to the ruling party's policies. Kim Jung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, today, July 17th, marks Korea's Constitution Day, the day when the nation's constitution was first proclaimed in 1948. But not many Koreans, especially the younger generation, know what the day is all about. Our Hwang Sung-hee went out to the streets in Seoul to find that out.
내일 7월 17일 무슨 날인지 알아요? 혹시?
아니요, 몰라요.
제헌절이 무슨 날인지는 알아요?
네. 헌법이 만들어지나?
혹시 내일 7월 17일 무슨 날인지 알아요?
내일 잘 모르겠는데. 그러니까 제헌절이라는 날은 있는 건 아는데 그거에 대해서 자세하게 아는 거는 별로.
Most of these teenagers on the street had no idea what Constitution Day is, and even if they knew, very few knew it fell on July 17th. A recent survey of some 12,000 elementary school students shows only half fully understand what the day is all about. A quarter didn't know what Constitution Day is, while 12% confused the day with other national holidays. Since 2008, Korea's Constitution Day stopped being a national holiday, a possible reason for the lack of understanding. So why was it removed? simply because there were too many holidays. And to raise awareness of the day the Constitutional Court of Korea is opening its doors to the people, students attend lectures, take quizzes, and try on the robes of the judges. Through that process, they get to appreciate the significance of Constitution Day and gain a better understanding of their own basic rights.
By coming here, I got some questions I had about the Constitution and about the court answered. It was good to come here because I got to learn things I couldn't learn in school.
Experts say it's important for people, and in particular the nation's younger generation, to appreciate Constitution Day as it lays the foundation for mature citizenship.
By going through the meaning of the Constitution, students will realize what is the meaning of democracy, the rule of law, and the meaning of basic rights of the citizens, basic liberties.
The court plans to hold the event every year. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Well, Korean policymakers have been drawing up measures to pull the country out of a low-growth trap since new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan recently ordered them to explore all possible means to stimulate the economy. And this could include putting their hands on public funds as well. Our Song Ji-sun has this report.
The government has rolled out a supplementary budget this year, but is determined to utilize all available state-run funds to stimulate the economy. Unnamed government officials told reporters that some 10 trillion won, or around $10 billion will be injected into the economy from public funds this year. Details have yet to be released, but officials say the National Housing Fund, which accounts for 9% of some $500 billion of funds run by the government this year, will play a major role in bolstering the real estate market. As a way to generate more construction activity, the government will also guarantee greater profits to companies taking part in infrastructure projects. To press companies to avoid hoarding excess cash and to increase investments, the government is considering levying taxes for cash reserves exceeding a certain limit. The government, on the other hand, says it will grant tax breaks and other incentives to companies going public or offering higher dividends. A comprehensive policy package designed to stimulate domestic demand will be released next week. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Well, producer prices in this country rose in June on year for the first time in nearly 2 years as farm products gained ground. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that producer prices inched up 0.1% last month and attributed the bump to livestock products, which have seen increases for 10 straight months. Now, from a year earlier, livestock products shot up more than 16% in June. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is expanding at a modest to moderate pace, and that is according to the U.S. Federal Reserve's monthly report. Now, it says all regions of the U.S. continue to expand their economic activity in the 6-week period that ended on July 7th, and added that consumer spending and manufacturing also rose. Wall Street responded positively to that news. S&P 500 and NASDAQ closed higher. The Dow Jones rose nearly 0.5% to close at its second record high close this month. And buoyed by the gains overseas, the Korean benchmark Kospi rose 0.4% today to close above the 2,000 mark at roughly shy of 2021. U.S. President Obama spoke to the press on Wednesday and laid down the law, a new set of sanctions on Russia for supporting rebels in Ukraine. Now, this is the latest attempt to punish Moscow and squeeze its $2 trillion economy. The U.S. acting in concert with the European Union imposed sanctions on Russian banks, energy companies, and defense firms.
These sanctions are significant, but they are also targeted, designed to have the maximum impact on Russia while limiting any spillover effects on American companies or those of our allies.
Well, among the companies hit by the U.S. penalties are Rosneft, Russia's largest oil company, and Gazprom Bank, which is the country's third largest lender. Moscow has been accused of providing arms to pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's east. U.S. media conglomerate Time Warner has rejected an unsolicited takeover offer by Rupert Murdochs' 21st Century Fox. Now, the offer was estimated to be worth about $76 billion, which is about 60% in stock and the rest in cash. Had it gone through, it would have made the combined company as large as rival Disney in market value. Analysts say, despite the rebuff, Murdoch will likely continue his pursuit of Time Warner. Spanish football team Real Madrid has claimed its #1 title again, and that's according to Forbes' list of the world's 50 most valuable sports teams. The European team was valued at $3.4 billion, taking first place for the second straight year. The next two slots were also occupied by football clubs, with FC Barcelona in second place at $3.2 billion, followed by Manchester United in third place, which was worth $2.8 billion. The value is based on the club's equity, debt, and stadium deals, and the average value of the 50 teams stood at $1.34 billion. Now back to Korea. Korea has experienced rapid growth over the past few decades and is doing extremely well, if you ask me, when it comes to things like exports, cutting-edge technology, and the like. But economic development doesn't seem to match up the nation's level of happiness. Well, according to a survey conducted by Ipsos Mori, which is a leading market research company in the UK, it found that just 64% of Koreans said they were happy. This placed Korea 19th out of the 20 countries surveyed, so at the very bottom of that list. And in the least happy country, Spain, only 59% of people felt satisfied with their lives. On the other end, Sweden topped the list with 88% saying they're happy, and Canadians and Australians were the happiest after that, ranking second and third respectively. Well, the leaders of the 5 BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, of course, took a step toward carving out a larger role for themselves in the global financial system when they agreed to base a new development bank in Shanghai. The significance and implications? Well, let's bring in Dr. Kim Jung Joo for a closer look. So, Dr. Kim, as soon as I heard this news of a BRICS-led development bank, I couldn't help but think about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which was, of course, discussed during the latest Korea-China summit. So I'd like to know what the difference is between this BRICS-led development bank and this AIIB.
That thinking on your side makes perfect sense because both of them are being led by Chinese, of course. And the starting point of these ideas had almost like a similar timing point. Actually, the new development bank sounds like it's something that we're hearing anew, but the thing is, it was actually agreed last year in Durban, South Africa, and this time it was signed. So the idea of this worldwide, global scale development bank as a new alternative to the World Bank, that idea has been going forward for quite some time. But the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the idea was, I think, first proposed by Xi Jinping in Indonesia last October. And during the Asia Development Bank meeting in Kazakhstan earlier this year, China offered further details about this. And now that has been, as you mentioned, discussed at the bilateral summit between China and Korea this time as well. The key difference is, which I have already mentioned, is New Development Bank is global in scale, and then Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is local in scale. So the first one, New Development Bank, is designed to challenge or further supplement World Bank, the global scale, and then Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is meant to challenge or further supplement Asia Development Bank. So those are the idea, global or regional.
Right, right. So is this more about the BRICS feeling that an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF is required, or is it that, in fact, that there is a structural shortcomings in these two institutions, or Western-led financial institutions, if you will?
Right. I think you're talking about, in addition to the New Development Bank, you're talking also about contingent reserve arrangement proposed as an perhaps alternative to IMF. The thing is, for quite some time, I mean, for the last about nearly 70 years, since the creation of the World Bank and the IMF, which have been called Bretton Woods institutions, taking the name from the place where it was initially discussed. The idea was discussed after the World War II. And there have been a lot of complaints about the shortcomings of these institutions for quite some time, for decades now. And now China has been leading these efforts to fill the gap. The thing is, besides all those points, first of all, right at this moment, there is a great need in terms of like the demand for capital to build infrastructure all around the world. According to the Bloomberg estimate, they're saying every year the world sees about 1.4 trillion US dollars size of a gap between the need that's needed and then what's being supplied to help us support infrastructure building in the developing world. $1.4 trillion. That gap needs to be filled. And so possibly this addition could actually help. Another one is China, India, and other countries have been asking for greater voice in the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank and IMF. And they have not been really getting it fast enough. So there has been that voice as the United States has been relatively losing its economic stance, as China is gaining more. There should be further reform in this kind of Bretton Woods institutions, but that has been quite slow in coming. Lastly, Washington consensus. A lot of people have been complaining that these Bretton Woods institutions, what they have been requiring in terms of on the side of recipient countries, have been all too much of the free trade-based kind of Western economist thinking, which doesn't work as well in the developing countries. So the demand or expectation for these kind of alternative institutions have been out there for quite some time.
Well, but this BRICS banking initiative certainly has its critics as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. The thing is, I think it includes Korea here. When this newly developed countries, including China, developing still, countries propose this kind of ideas of, like designing systems to help developing countries, they have their hidden agenda in their mind, meaning that by helping these kind of developing countries, these countries hope to have their own footholds kind of being built in those countries. Japan has been infamous for that, attaching conditions to their economic aids. China is gaining further recognition for that, those kind of strategy. And some people say Korea has been adding too many conditions to its aid to developing countries as well. So those kind of hidden agendas is a key issue of concern here. So indeed, a lot of countries are saying that needs to be addressed before we address the other questions. Well, we have all the other issues such as conditionality and accountability, moral hazard, all that. But for the interest of time, I'll just stop with that point about national hidden agenda here.
But even though these new donor countries may have their own hidden agendas, overall, is it not a positive development that these emerging economies or developing world, they have another resource from which it could receive aid from, assistance from?
That is a great point, actually. So if China rises up and then declares its intention to further increase the pool for money to be used to help developing countries and then create a pool to help countries in need in the time of crisis, of liquidity crisis and so on. Isn't that a good thing? Well, that is a legitimate question right there. But the thing is, I was with the World Bank during the early part of 1990s. At that time, I don't think the community for so-called the development cooperation didn't really, I don't think we really had a clear idea about how to go about helping the developing countries. And still, after several decades, I don't think the world really has a clear consensus or idea about how to help developing countries here. One thing that we should keep in mind is in this development cooperation, we have different players. On the donor side, we have donor governments such as US government, Chinese government, and then the Russian government and Japanese government and all that. And also we have donor businesses that has its eyes on the further future possibilities of getting interest out of this, by helping.
Right.
On the recipient side, we have people in poverty who need to be helped. But the thing is, we also have regimes that have not necessarily been selected democratically there.
Right.
So continuing to offer this kind of help with this regardless of this kind of oppression, corruption, and all that kind of stuff, is it really helping those people in need, in poverty? I think the question is still out there. When China and Russia come out saying we want to help developing countries, will they really help those people in need? I think there's a great question to that.
Right. I mean, it seems like there are so many dimensions to this this one financial institution or resource fund or helping fund or whatever you call it, and it should really trickle down to the people who actually need it. But of course, that's not the way it works in the world, and everyone has their own interests, and with that, they will carry on their agendas.
That's for sure.
All right, Dr. Kim Jung Joo, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
And that is your business today on this Thursday. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.